But to shift gears a little bit, now I want to talk about the analytics side behind customer experience, and really about how we can use analytics to help us move forward in the organization. And to a great extent, we need to continue to evolve how we use customer experience analytics to be able to better utilize them to understand what's going on in our businesses with our customer experience and with our customers. And this evolution is very important because it's happening whether we want it to or not. Our customers are forcing this. And to a great extent, from my perspective at least, and I think probably all of us in this room would agree, but I think the customers would agree too, that the customer experience is more important today than it ever has been before. And the reality is if you're not measuring it, you're really operating in the dark. And you can use lots of other analogies. You wouldn't want a surgeon at the Cleveland Clinic operating on you in the dark. We wouldn't want to be driving in a taxi with the taxi driver with a paper bag over his head. All kinds of scenarios. Well, when we're treating with our customers, we don't want to be operating that in the dark either. We want to make sure that we really understand the experience that they're having and what we can do to improve it. And this is the dramatic in the dark, not nearly as dramatic as the video we saw, but when we're operating in the dark, it is a challenge. And it's not just Larry and Foresee and my colleagues that are saying it, but it's also all the experts around are saying it. And whether it's Peppers and Rogers or Forrester or the Temkin Group, everybody really realizes that now is the time, now is the era of customer experience. And the question really is why? Why is it now more important than it's ever been before? Well, the reality is customer experience is changing. The consumers are changing as well. Customers today are far smarter than they've ever been before. They have more information at their fingertips. They have more knowledge. They have access to more information. The internet started that process, and mobile has taken it to a whole other level. If they're walking down your store aisles, or whether they're watching your broadcast on TV, or whether they're in your bank, or they're on the phone with your customer service representative, they've got access to more information at their fingertips, whether it be the internet, on a mobile phone, an app, a website, at their desk, whatever the case may be. So they have more knowledge, and with knowledge comes power. It used to be that when you walked into a retailer, as an example, the associate knew more about the products than you did. That's probably not the case anymore. And if you don't know enough, you pull out your phone and you look at some product reviews and you do some competitive research. At the same time, consumers have much louder voices than they've ever had before. And so instead of just annoying and one disgruntled customer that goes away, that customer has a loud voice that gets magnified through social media. And in turn, others are listening a lot, right? So we've got loud mouths and loud big ears from the consumer perspective. It makes every experience magnified many, many, many times over. And the final point really is that consumers have many more choices they've ever had before. Competitively, it is much easier to build a competitive organization to what you have today. Companies don't have to build big infrastructures in order to be in business. The web, technology, the cloud, software as a service, all those things help. And so the result is that consumers have a lot more choices than they've ever had before. Not only a lot more choices to deal with you in terms of what channels, as they go to the web, as they go to mobile, as they call your call centers, as they visit your locations, but also in terms of the competitive forces. The bottom line is what it's done is it's put more power in the hands of the consumer, and the switching costs for consumers have gotten very low. The most important words in most businesses used to be location, location, location. It's not the case anymore. The three most important words now should be the customer, the customer, the customer. So the consumer has control, they have lots of choices, and it's very easy for them to change. So what determines where they go and where they do business? The customer experience. And if you're not measuring it, you're in trouble. There's a saying, this goes back to the time of Deming and the quality movement, you can't manage what you don't measure. And I think it's very, very true, right? I would actually take it a step further to say you can't improve something if you're not measuring it. And most people would say, well, I can still make improvements even if I'm not measuring. But how do you know? How do you know you've made an improvement unless you have a measurement to show you? Whether it's trying to lose a few pounds, whether it's trying to lower your cholesterol, whether it's trying to improve your golf game. If you stop keeping score, if you're not measuring it anymore, you really won't know if you've improved it or not. And the penalty for having a bad customer experience is magnified many times over. Consumers, again, they have the choice. They can go quickly. They can be in multiple places at the same time with technology, right? They can clone themselves, so that really, really introduces a big challenge for companies. And the penalty is not only that you've lost that customer, you've lost that acquisition cost, but also, again, it can be magnified many times over because they only become not just a disgruntled customer, but they also become a liability out there talking about the negative aspect or negative experience they had. So if you step back and say, well, what if? What if I could understand exactly why we're not meeting our customers' expectations, why we're not meeting their needs? What if I can understand why we're not converting those visitors to customers and why are we driving customers away? What if I could really understand that about my organization? What if I could know how the customer experience compares to others competitively? Organizations around me, my peer group, best in class, other industries that I look up to, other companies that I look up to. And what if you could accurately identify where to make investments that would maximize the investments you make to improve the customer experience and change the behavior to get those loyalty behavioral aspects that you want out of your customer relationships? What if I was able to make informed decisions about where to invest, where to make tactical changes, where to make operational changes, and where to make strategic changes in my business to really give us the ability to gain a competitive advantage? There was a book written probably about 10 years ago now called Competing on Analytics by Tom Davenport. And I think it really started some people, it took a long time in my mind for it to build momentum, to think about the power of analytics in your business. Now, when it was written, it was mostly focused on behavioral analytics. What people did, where they visited, how many times they, one of the big case stories was Harrah's in it, and how many times they gambled and how frequently they gambled and all those things. And we collected an enormous amount of data, big data, lots of behavioral data. But now it's time to take the customer experience aspect into that, which goes far beyond the behavior, but about what they're thinking. And then if I'm able to do this, can I really align my whole organization around the customer? And you saw from Dr. Merlino an example of how Cleveland Clinic has really done that. They've changed their culture to be focused on the customer. So I think the challenge for us all as we think about customer experience analytics and how they're evolving is, can we have this capability as an organization to give us a competitive advantage in the marketplace? But how do you do it? Well, if we step back and look at where analytics are today, I kind of refer to it as analytics chaos. Lots of different ways of measurement, lots of trends, lots of buzzwords, lots of different methodologies, lots of different approaches, lots of different kinds of data to gather. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't give us the value and the execution that we need out of it. And so we need to start thinking about going forward. The biggest challenge, I think, today is that most of them are siloed. They're one channel, they're one part of your company, not the whole part of your company. And that's a really, really big challenge for organizations as they think through this and as they try to figure out how to improve things. What we want to do is we want to move to this next generation of customer experience analytics, where we're no longer looking at a single channel or a single touch point, but we're able to look at a representation of consumers as they move through all of our channels and touch points. So in the Cleveland Clinic example, while the experience you have in the hospital is incredibly important, but so is the experience they have when they call to make an appointment. So is the experience when they have to go on a website. So is the experience when they deal with their insurance company after the fact. All relate back to that experience they had as a patient. So we need to be able to look beyond just a single channel. We need to look beyond a single touch point that a consumer has and look at it from the perspective of the customer as they're looking across all these channels. Traditionally, or today or yesterday, you could say, mostly customer experience analytics have been focused very much on tactical and operational changes. Monitoring call center volume, monitoring call center experience. What can I do to improve that one agent? And that's important, but we need to go beyond that. We need to start thinking about strategically. Where do I take my business? It's great that so many senior people are now in this role of customer experience, and often they're reporting to the top levels of the organization. But it's got to be more than just a reporting structure. It has to be a way the company thinks. Companies can gain a competitive advantage by really focusing on customer experience and maximizing their investments to improve it. Traditionally, customer experience has been dominated by behavioral data, what people have done. That's not predictive. If we see what someone has done in the past, does it tell us what they're going to do in the future? Not really. If you think about it, there's things that we all do every day that don't really predict the future, but say we completed a task, such as downloading the latest tax tables from your software for your tax preparation as we get closer to April 15th, such as it's your anniversary or your wife's birthday and you have to buy a present, such as you need to go visit and open an account or apply for a mortgage. We're going to go through those processes and complete those tasks because we need to. We have deadlines, we have requirements, we have obligations, there's things we have to do. But the experience that we had, if we're having a great experience, means that going forward we're going to be a customer. We're going to be loyal. We're going to recommend them to others. So the behavior tells you what has happened, but if we look forward and see if we satisfied that customer experience perspective, that tells us what's going to happen in the future. And then feedback versus measurement. I hear a lot of people when they talk about customer experience talking about all the comments they get and the feedback mechanisms they have in place. And that's important. I'm not trying to minimize the value and strength of that. But what happens when you're dealing with feedback is you really don't get a representation of your broader audience. And we've done some research on this. If you map out feedback mechanisms, whether they be direct to your company via email, via phone call, via letter, via a click on a button on your website, or whether you look at social media feedback, you get a perspective that you get only the negatives and the positives. And in fact, when you look at the data, most often for most companies, when the feedback's direct to your company, it's almost all very, very negative and a little bit positive, very positive, and no one in the middle. When you look at social, it's almost often very, very, very positive, some very, very negative, and again, nobody in the middle. I've never seen anybody post anything on Facebook or Twitter and say, hey, I had a pretty decent stay at a hotel, at a conference, and it was okay, and I maybe you'll think about going back again, right? Either you love it or you hate it. And so what happens when we look just at feedback, we ignore that silent majority. 90% of your customers are somewhere in between that extreme negative and extreme positive. Now, we can learn something from those extreme positives and negatives, but we want to manage our business to the 90%. We want to manage our business to the people that are going to matter most to the success of our business, not just the squeaky wheel. So we want to not just do feedback, while that's helpful and informative, we want to have a measurement system in place that allows us to make good strategic decisions. So it's really about going from what was yesterday to what should be tomorrow in terms of how we build out our customer experience analytics, our measurement systems, the way we analyze data, the way we diagnose the situation, to give us that next generation with better value, better execution, and across all channels. And it's really about answering three key questions. The first is, how are we doing? From a performance standpoint, how are we comparing against ourselves over time and against our peers, within channels, within touch points, but across the overall relationship as well that we have with our customers. The second is, what should we do? Where should we focus our efforts so we get the maximum return on that investment? Not just to make people happier, but to make them more satisfied with the experience in order to change their behavior. The end goal is changing their behavior. We want them more loyal. We want them saying good things about us. We want them coming back and buying more or visiting more or watching more or reading more or whatever our business model needs. And the third is, why should we do it? It is possible to get to a point of diminishing return, although you don't see it very often. But we want to understand what the payback is for making those improvements. And when we have a customer experience analytics system that can help us answer these three questions, not only across each channel and touch point, but across the relationship we have with our customers, now we have something that can be beyond operational and tactical, but also very strategic for our business and can give you that competitive advantage. So the attributes that these systems need to have is, one, they need to have a level of accuracy, reliability, and precision like no other. We need to rely on that data. We need to trust that data to make the right investments and the right decisions. We need to be able to take action on it. It needs not to be just making us feel good, but things that we can do something with. It needs to be predictive. It needs to be forward-looking and look out in the future, not just analyzing what happened yesterday. And it needs to be both an omni-channel or merged channel or multi-channel, whatever word you want to use these days. We need to look at each of those channels, but we also need to look across the brand and how we're being perceived as an organization. And every touch point, for most organizations, every touch point is a potential point of failure where you lose that organization, where the organization loses that consumer forever. And so it's important that we understand what those are. We need to take behavioral data and feedback, but also apply a measurement system to it as well so we can make good decisions. It needs to be integrated with other sources of data. No measurement system when we're talking about customer experience can stand on its own. It's about behavior. It's about other sources of data. It's about the history we have with our customers. It's about the outcomes. It's about their satisfaction with the experience, and so on. And it still needs to be not only a broad level, brand level view, but it still needs to be actionable in each channel, at each touch point, at each stage of the life cycle of the consumer, because that's where we're going to make our investments. That's where we're going to make difference. So if I know people are not happy or not recommending me, what do I do with it? I need to go to those channels, those experiences they're having, whether they're visiting our store, whether they're calling into our banking center, whether they're coming in and being admitted to the hospital. I need to understand each of those touch points and see how I can improve it. If I don't measure the touch points, I maybe will understand where I am from a performance standpoint, but I'm not going to know how to fix it. So by measuring at the touch point level, we're able to fix it. So where this really came together for me was a few months ago, about 6 months ago. I was at a dinner with Billy Beane and from the Moneyball. Have you ever seen or heard of the Moneyball movie or the book or whatever? And it was really interesting having a conversation with him after the presentation was done, and I had the fortune to be sitting at a table with him. And he said some things about how they apply analytics in baseball that really made sense to me beyond just baseball. And I'm a big baseball fan, and if you saw the movie, it was about on-base percentage being better than batting average and RBIs. But the reality is in year 2, everybody else had seen the movie, and they all knew that as well. And every year, what the Oakland A's do under Billy Beane's leadership is they improve the analytics. They evolve the analytics to come up with better analytics. Because the things that they did last year, everybody else has figured out. And so when you step back and everyone talks about innovation in a company, I think we need to look beyond just our products and our services that we're offering, but we need to look at our analytics as well. And those companies that can evolve and innovate their analytics and take it to that next level are the ones that are going to have that competitive advantage. We're going to have the data to make the better decisions than our competitors. The way you beat competitor, one way to beat a competitor is that the investments you make have a higher return on their investment than what your competitors make. Those who make the best investments are the ones that are going to be successful from an ROI standpoint and from a competitive standpoint. Because they're either going to gain ground on their competitor, they're going to separate themselves from their competitor, or they're going to catch up and pass their competitor. And that's what Billy Beane does in baseball. Every year they're coming up with new analytics that he won't talk about. He'll talk about the on-base percentage and the stuff that's old news. But now he's looking at what can I do next year. And as a customer experience profession, we need to keep building on it. It doesn't replace what we've done. It's not that there's a new shiny new toy that's going to replace everything that we did, but it's about building and adding and complementing the analytics so that they get better and more accurate and more precise. And so when we think about the next generation of customer experience analytics, we can lay out what it is today, but next year it's going to have to be a little bit better if you want to be at the top of your game and the top of your industry. But what it needs to be is it needs to give us the benefit of that holistic understanding of the relationship our customers have, both at a channel and a device standpoint, but also at a company standpoint. We need to be able to identify which channels are the strengths and weaknesses of our organization. We need to know where to focus those improvements, what levers to pull so that we get those benefits that we want. We want more informed decisions that we're going to make that are not about just improving the experience, but are improving the experience for the benefit of the business. More loyalty, higher retention, bigger average order size, whatever the key metrics are for the success of your business. And it's important that these start to get visibility at the C-suite. When your board and your C-suite are starting to look at customer experience, then you are on the right path to having a great system of analytics that's going to help you win and compete. So when you think about it, the customer experience, it's really not about the web channel or the mobile channel. Everybody says this is the year of mobile, and I think I would agree to some extent. But it's not about that. It's not about multi-channel or omni-channel or any aspects of that. It's really about one company. You may think of your organization as I have my call center, I have my mobile group, I have my web group, I've got my product group, whatever the case may be. But the consumer doesn't look at it that way. They don't look at the fact that they're dealing with a website or that they're dealing with a store or they're watching a broadcast or reading a book or reading a newspaper or walking into a bank. They look at it as one company and one brand. I had an experience about a year ago. My son wanted to get a video game. It was on the weekend. He said, "Dad, I got a $35 gift card. This game is available. Will you drive me to the store to get it?" Sure. We go to the store. We get there. He gets the game. He says, "I need $5." I said, "Hey, you told me it was 35. He goes, "It was online, but it's 40 in the store." I said, "Come on, really?" So I pull out my phone, I look at it, and sure enough, it was 35 online and 40 in the store for the same company. And I was extremely loyal to this company. I would not think about buying electronics somewhere else at this point in time. So I went up to the associate, and I showed him my phone and showed him the product. "Oh, sure, we'll match that." Okay, so we got the product for 35. But what happened to my relationship with that company? I used to trust them that they were treating me right, they were giving me the best price, not necessarily against the competition all the time. I know that's not realistic, but at least within their own organization. So I happen to know some folks at that organization. I called them up on Monday. I said, "Hey, what's the story on this?" And he goes, "Oh, yeah, that's our strategy." I said, "Really? Tell me why." Well, their strategy was that the web channel had to compete. And they thought that the competition was Amazon and others. So they adjusted their prices accordingly. And the stores had to compete with the local competition, so they adjusted their prices. And what happened in all of that process? They ignored the customer. So I thought, wow, this is crazy. So I was at another retailer organization. I'm telling the story without any names. And they're like, oh, yeah, we do that too. And at that point, I realized that everybody that was talking about multi-channel and omni-channel was really just blowing smoke up our you-know-what, right? The reality is they didn't care about the customer. They cared about optimizing their channels. Now they're starting to step back and really realize that it's more than that it's all about that customer relationship and the trust you can build and the loyalty you can build. So as you have organizations, as you have metrics within those organizations, within those channels, within those delivery mechanisms, step back and think about it's the overall relationship that's important. So we have some research. We love to gather data. We gather a lot of research. I'm going to share with you a fair amount of numbers. If any of you are interested in these numbers, you can just drop a business card off or send me an email and we will send you a copy of this. So you don't have to scurry right real quick or take pictures of it. Obviously, feel free to if you want. I'm going to start look at retail a little bit. We gathered an enormous amount of data during the holiday season of over 100 websites, almost 30 stores and 25 mobile sites, almost 40,000 consumers through the holiday season to really look at the multi-channel experience, the omni-channel experience, and what was going on. Before we did that, though, we went out and found out, well, how much is really happening on the web and mobile? And this isn't visitor activity because those would be different numbers, but this is commerce. So 89% of transactions or commerce done during the holiday season, during the fourth quarter, were done through stores or traditional means of catalogs and contact centers, 10% done online and 1% done on mobile. But let's look at how consumers looked at this. So a lot of data here, but overall, when the people that purchased on the web had a satisfaction score of 83 with the customer experience on a scale of 0 to 100. But what's most interesting is 32% of them said they were multi-channel. And within the 68% that were web only 39% didn't go to a competitor. So 39% of the total traffic visited the company's website only and bought. They didn't go to a competitor, they didn't go to another channel. If we look at store purchasers, their satisfaction score was a 78. And here we see that 71% of them were multi-channel. Right? And only 23% in the lower left here only dealt with the store for that company. 6% only dealt with the store channel but went to a competitor as well. Right? 36% were multi-channel and only dealt with the company though, so you didn't really have that competitive risk. And 36% were multi-channel and dealt with competitors as well across those channels. If you look at mobile purchasers, a score of 84, so good satisfaction scores overall, but these are people that have purchased, and here we see that 98% were multi-channel. So the point of this is really that consumers during the holiday season were very, very much multi-channel. They were going from channel to channel. It was a very competitive environment, and so the experience really mattered a lot to where people purchased and where they didn't. Showrooming, a big concept in retail. I think of it as a half glass full or half glass empty. Now, it's a beer glass, so for some retailers, showrooming drives them to drink. For others, it's about, hey, the glass is half full, this is a good thing. So a little bit of data from the showrooming aspect. And the reason that it's a glass half full is because other organizations are potentially driving consumers into your stores, and you have the opportunity to win them. You have the opportunity while they're in the store looking at a product they want. If you do a good job, you can close that deal, right? So that's where the glass is half full. So out of the people that we surveyed in our store survey, 24% said they had used a mobile phone while in a store during the holiday season. 53% that we surveyed in our web survey said that, and 67% in the mobile. And here are the things they said they did. So this was a multiple select, so these numbers add up to more than 100, but roughly between 46 and 62% of them said that they used that phone to access the store's mobile website. Now that's actually really encouraging because they're not going to the competitor. So it's not like walking down the aisles of Target and bringing up Amazon on your phone, but actually bringing up the Target website or the Target app. Now about a third though went to the competitor's website, and about 20% went to some sort of shopping comparison site looking for the best price. So again, what's going to drive customers to buy? The customer experience. And customer experience and the satisfaction with it is far more than just making them happy. It's the overall experience they have and how satisfied they are, which includes the products, it includes the availability of it, it includes the pricing, it includes the experience they have in the store, it includes their trust in that organization, and so on. So if we look at financial services, some quick data on that. We looked at overall banking. These are looking at banks through the entire relationship across channels. On a scale of 0 to 100, the satisfaction score is 77. Surprisingly, the online banking score is also a 77, which is, to me, is disappointing from an online perspective, because online should have a higher score than offline because of the advantages of anytime, anywhere, high consistency, and so on. But if we break it down and look at the marketing side of websites, we saw a score of 69, which is very low. On the secure side, this is the authenticated side, for online banking 84 and for mobile 79. And here are the outcomes. How likely are they to recommend? How likely are they to return, and so on. And you can see that on the online banking public side, there's very low recommendation, yet they're still pretty likely to return, but not nearly as much as obviously when they have a banking customer. Consumers are going across channels, they're using these different mechanisms. Health insurance providers, of the 40% of the visitors, they were unable to accomplish their task. So 40% of the people that visited a health insurance website said they were unable to complete their task. Out of that group, 38% said they plan to contact customer service. Their satisfaction score is a 31. That's worse than the IRS, and no disrespect meant to the IRS. That resulted for, if you just took an example of 2 million website visitors, $1.52 million of additional cost of driving those people away from the website to a call center. Again, they're going multi-channel if we're not providing a good experience. On the travel mobile side, we looked at the single channel consumers that only went to one mobile app or site, represented 46% of the audience, and 54% went to multi-channel. And when we looked at the different steps they took, 72% went to some other online travel website, 56% said they went to some mobile site or app, 47% were relying on word of mouth, which is a very high number, but for travel it sort of makes sense. 23% went to a travel agent, which I was surprised that number was as high as it is. And then 11% said they had really no preference and they really just didn't go to those other research organizations. Again, satisfaction scores are likelihood to recommend and return across those. So when you look at all this data, and the real point of the data is that as we dive deep into it, and that data wasn't going to give you all the answers, but was just kind of an industry perspective of how consumers are moving around in these organizations, it's really about managing forward. It's about taking these analytics and utilizing them to manage forward our experience to what we call the next generation customer experience analytics. So we wrote a book about this, about how you can use customer experience analytics to help you manage your business forward. Instead of just looking at behavioral data, but look more broadly than that to really understand the impact the experience has on our consumers and what we can do to improve it. And it's about being able to make tactical and operational decisions. So operational is looking at what things happened yesterday, monitoring the performance, the testing that I'm doing, the changes that I'm making. Tactical is about the changes this week, this month, this quarter. And strategic are about those big business decisions that you make that should have a lot of the customer experience rooted in them. I think Netflix is a great example. Is there anybody here from Netflix? Okay, good. Netflix is a great example of a company that really focused on the business side of making a decision and forgot about the customer experience. And economically, everything they did made sense when they split into two organizations, and they actually were going to lower everybody's cost, but you had to choose between whether you're going to do streaming or DVR rentals, or DVD rentals. But they didn't take the customer's perspective into that. They didn't understand that customers felt like things were being taken away from them, even though most people weren't using both sides of the equation. So strategic, if we make those strategic decisions where we have that customer experience in mind, it can make us a lot more effective. So the next generation customer experience analytics needs to be integrated metrics. It needs to be multiple sources of data. It needs to be across multiple touch points and multiple channels. And if we have integrated metrics, it's going to lead us to better metrics. And that's going to allow us to make better business decisions, more informed business decisions that will ultimately mean a better experience for our customers. And if we do that and we're successful at that, that means that we're going to succeed as a company. And that's what it's all about. It's about improving the customer experience so that the company does better. That's the name of the game. That's why we're in business. So why is it important? A little bit more data for you. Here what we did was we looked at a series of industries, and we looked at the highly satisfied consumers, those that were satisfied with the experience, and compared it to those that were dissatisfied. So scores on a scale of 0 to 100 of 80 and above compared to below 70. And we can see across all of these outcomes, the difference between the highly satisfied consumer and the dissatisfied consumer is significant. They're 70% more likely to recommend us to others. They're 71% more likely to buy in channel. They are 61% more likely to return, and so on. A big payback for any company to make that investment in improving the customer experience. But it's not just in web. It also exists when we go on mobile. We see similar kinds of numbers. The highly satisfied are 72% more likely to recommend us to somebody else, and they are 69% more likely to buy in that mobile channel if they have a great experience. If we're talking about the store shopper, they are 48% more likely to buy in our store, and they are 63% more likely to buy in another channel, web or mobile or call center. If we look at online banking consumers, those that are highly satisfied are 135% more likely to recommend. And they are actually 108% more likely to use additional services, which for banks is a big key, that share a wallet. When we go to travel, we see that the highly satisfied are 67% more likely to recommend us, and 73% more likely to use mobile as a primary resource. And as we go to healthcare, they're 149% more likely to recommend, and so on. The data is compelling that if we improve the customer experience, our customers will reward us with the loyalty and behavior that we want. So, next generation customer experience analytics is about multi-channel. You can substitute omni-channel, merge channel, anything you want in that phrase. But it's about multi-channel predictive analytics. Predictive analytics, things that help us predict the future in the measurement and analysis of the customer experience. And if we do that, it's going to allow us to change the way that we're making investments in business decisions, and will give us the opportunity to have a competitive advantage. But that competitive advantage will only last until your competitors catch up to you, and then we're going to have to continue to innovate and find better ways to improve the customer experience analytics. So they must be accurate, reliable, and precise, actionable and predictive, so we can not only know how we're doing, but know where to invest and where to take our business forward. And we need to look at every touch point, but also across that whole relationship. And it needs to have the benchmarks so we can know how we're doing against others, because ultimately that's a great way to explain to executives where we are and where do we need to make investments. Foresee does this for companies across all channels, across the US and in Europe and elsewhere. And these are just some of the companies that we work with to do it. We've collected now, this number is wrong, it said 80 million surveys. We're at 96 million surveys that we've collected over time that allow us to understand that customer experience. And those are 96 million surveys all focused on the customer experience. We work with about half of the Fortune 100, 9 of the top 10 companies in the Fortune 100, but also small and mid-sized organizations as well. So some things to think about as you wrap up the day today, as you go through these other sessions today and tomorrow. And there are things that I would keep in mind even as you leave and head back to your office. The first thing is we cannot manage what we don't measure. And in fact, I would say that we can't improve it if we're not measuring it. So we need measurement in place. That's key. If we're not measuring the customer experience, we're really operating in the dark. And the measurements need to be through the eyes of the consumer. We need to measure from their perspective, not from the organization's perspective. What I mean by that is we all have metrics that we rely on, that we're compensated on, that are internally focused. What our sales are, what our customer churn is, what our customer defection rates are, what our return on inventory, return on assets, whatever those key financial metrics you have internally, average order size, subscriptions, all kinds of metrics for all kinds of companies. But those are all internally focused. We want to look at it from the customer's perspective too. We're not going to eliminate those critical business metrics, but we want to complement that with the customer experience metrics, because that's through the eyes of the consumer, and that's what's going to determine what they do next. We want to measure every touch point of every device, because that's where we're going to make our investments. That's where we're going to pull the levers to improve the overall customer experience. And then finally, we need to keep innovating. If we don't, we're going to lose that competitive advantage. But if we do innovate and we do continue to strive for that next generation customer experience, we are going to have a competitive advantage. Again, my name is Larry Fried. I'm with Foresee. We'd love to talk to you more about this stuff. We're in the exhibit hall next door. If you'd like a copy of this presentation, feel free to drop a card or send me an email or a tweet, and we'd be more than happy to help you. Do we have a few minutes for questions?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Are there any questions? Behind you.
Larry, how are you doing on connecting the customer experience metrics to the internal metrics that people are compensated on, like comp store sales and things like that?
It's incredibly important to do it. I would tell you that it's a little harder today than it should be, mostly because organizations have a hard time getting those numbers out of their systems. In a perfect world, you would do it at a respondent level, and in some of our measurements, we're able to do that where it's a post-purchase, or we'll actually can monitor someone that browsed a website or a mobile device, and if they purchased through that same channel within 30 days, we can actually understand that they purchased and what those dollar amounts were. But companies also, in some cases, are starting to provide daily sales numbers so that you can see the trends across time on a day-to-day basis. It's harder than it should be, though, to be honest with you, to organizations to pull that data out. And I think that's an important aspect. Part of the next generation, to me, is the integration of the data that you already have with the gathering of the customer experience data. We do integration to a fair amount of partners like Clickstream Analytics and things like that that lets you bring that data in, but you ultimately still need that financial data. That's the most important part.
Hi, Larry. I'm with 3M. We've been using your session replay and Foresee product for quite some time. We've set some goals globally where we want to see improvement in the Foresee scores, all 11 metrics. What's a reasonable time frame in which you should move the needle?
So, reasonable time frame depends a little bit on the range of the score changes. And one of the things to remember when you're setting an improvement objective on a customer satisfaction or customer experience score is that there are a lot of competing forces for that score. A lot of forces that will actually force your score down. So as an example, if you do not go out and attract new customers, new potential customers to your business, your scores are going to go up over time, right? Because those that don't like it leave and go away, and the people that stay continue to be satisfied to a certain level. Often the people that are the least satisfied are those that are new. So if you're going into new markets, into new geographies, if you're doing new marketing efforts to try to attract people, those will actually be people that come in generally at a lower score than those people that have already survived the process of customer acquisition and stay with you. Generally, though, what we see is most people, when they're setting those targets, are setting them on an annual basis. I think you could go as far as 6 months, but I probably wouldn't go any closer in time frame than that for looking for those objectives to improve. And the other important thing, I think, is to, when you set those objectives, is to look at audience segments as opposed to the whole universe. So look at your loyal customers, look at your B2B customers, look at your B2C consumers, look at your brand new customers that come through other markets, and actually, to get another step of detail, set objectives for each one of those different audience segments.
In the spirit of sharing, it's interesting. Hello, I work for Macy's. It's interesting when you start setting these programs up and you run them. In year one, you see great growth because everybody's behind it, and you're doing something different because, by definition, if you're going to measure it, you're going to do something different. Usually, you see, and I'd be interested in hearing what you would say, Larry. Year two, it gets softer. I mean, the rate of increase is softer, only because you get a little complacent. And all of a sudden you wake up and say, oh man, I didn't do anything different this year. I keep doing what I did last year. And then you start it again. And so you see these plateaus and things grow. And maybe you've seen the same thing, Larry, I don't know.
A little bit. Sometimes you get some low-hanging fruit that when you start a measurement system, you very quickly identify easy opportunities, low-hanging fruit to go in and fix. And then sometimes that second year is a lot harder. We've seen organizations, though, have sometimes more success in the second year because in the first year, they're still getting comfortable with this new analytic, this new metric. One of the other things that Billy Beane said, and this was in the movie, and it was a question I asked him, in the movie it showed that he never watched the game. And I was like, really? You really don't watch the game? So he goes, I can't. And because if I do, I'm going to get emotional. And he said, every club in baseball today has some sort of analytics that they're using. The difference between the Oakland A's and everybody else is the Oakland A's trust it. It's what they use to make decisions, right? They don't go by gut instinct anymore. They use the data to make decisions. He used a great example that if you count cards 3 out of every 4 hands in Las Vegas, it's really not going to help you a lot, right? If you're using analytics to 3 out of 4 times when you make a decision, it's not going to help you enough. And so a lot of times in that first year, we see organizations starting to get comfortable with these new measurements, these new analytics, and how they interact with the ones that they've been bonused on over time. And then in year 2, they'll start to actually trust those analytics more because they'll see what they mean to their business. And in some organizations, we'll even start to put financial objectives, bonuses on those metrics, and that is how you can keep that sort of motor running, if you will. But a lot of times there's that shiny new toy. What can we do different? And I think, the thing is that like technology, to do customer experience analytics right, it's about them being incremental. It's not about replacing what you do. It's about building more analytics in to get a better picture and a better understanding of the experience.